All right, ladies and gents, a huge welcome back to you all to your professional diploma in digital marketing. Right, so in today's lesson, we're going to discover how we can effectively reach our target market. It's going to be a very exciting lesson for that very matter. And for that, of course, we need to find out who our target market actually is. Let's have a quick look at what we're going to be learning today. So by the end of this lesson, we'll be able to define your target market. You'll be able to develop buyer personas for your business, and we'll also be able to get to know some marketing funnels, and we'll be able to pick up on how to pick the right channels for our marketing efforts, which all aligns those aspects together. It's very important that we consolidate this information into one holistic understanding. Right, we're going to be getting into target audience to kick things off. And before we go any further, we do have to ask ourselves one question. What is a target audience? So your target market is a group of people who could benefit from your product or service, whereas your target audience are the people that you're actively trying to sell to. So there is quite a bit of a difference between the two. Those terms are things that will come up quite a bit, particularly a target audience, as we're focusing more on paid media. But that is important to know, as we don't want to forget about the entire market, right? We don't want to forget about the entire market because essentially we are marketing to the entire market. We're just trying to segment it to the best of our abilities. But just segmented parts of it is what matters to us right now, because we're focusing on a small hand group of individuals that we can perfect our understanding of and obviously direct our advertising to properly to be efficient and effective in our efforts. That's what's so great about digital marketing. We can be a lot more specific about who sees our advertising. Let me make this a bit clearer for you. Imagine you're putting up a billboard in a location of your choice. You can choose where it's displayed, but everyone is going to get the opportunity to see it. In digital marketing, you can choose the placement. Say if you want to place some banner ads on a website, plus you get to choose what type of people are going to be seeing it. These would be your best target audience, right? Obviously, the ones who go to certain websites. They have a set of characteristics that are defined by you, and you would generally pick up on the ones that you think have the highest performance. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, so let's start off a little bit more simpler. So step one is to ask yourself, what problem is your product trying to solve? Right? Before you start thinking about how you're going to place your banners, what websites you're going to be starting to look at, what problem are you trying to solve? That's what you first need to think of right away. If we want to go through a few examples, let's say you're a restaurant or restaurant owner, right? Literally, the problem that you're trying to solve or a solution that you're trying to provide is food to people who don't want to cook themselves. That's essentially what it comes down to in a restaurant business. Maybe because they're feeling lazy, or they might just want to go for a nice evening out and have an experience. Maybe they have a celebration. We all know that the point of a restaurant is going out and just enjoying the moment, right? That's essentially what a restaurant is able to cater for. If you're running a boutique, you'd provide people with something to wear, clothes to keep up with the seasons, for example, and latest trends too, professional ones, sportswear, and so on. And then the last example could be stationery. So if you own a stationery shop, you solve the fact that people need to take notes, just like you're supposed to be doing right now. Wink, wink. You know, they need to write. They might need some office supplies, and they might want to do some arts and crafts. In fact, it might be required of them depending on what grade they're in at school or university, right? There's stationery for every single need and want, and you can actually cater for that. You're solving the problem for that need or want. For that, they need materials, right? And you can actually, as a stationery shop, be the provider of a solution to that problem. So step two, after asking yourself what problem or problems your product or services are solving, then it's going to get a little bit more detailed, and you're going to have to start asking who you are going to start solving the problem for, right? This is where we start diving in a little bit deeper. You can solve the problem for everyone, essentially. This is where you need to start getting into a bit more detail, though, because it's not everyone who's really going to be coming to your shops. You need to identify a small segment out of the big picture of who everyone is, so that you can be more effective and efficient in your efforts. Let's go through a clothing example again. We previously mentioned a boutique. So the questions that you need to think about with regards to this example are things like, are you selling women's or men's or children's clothing, or a combination of all of these? Are you selling to any age specifically, or are there specific ages at all? Is there pricing on high-end, affordable or cheap aspects to what you're doing? And also, do you offer local, national or global distribution at all through an online shop, an e-commerce site, for instance? Now, the last three questions will be applicable to any business, but of course, the first one is for clothing. Then the next step within those groups of people that you've identified so far is, can you identify any specific consumer behaviors or interests that would be advantageous to you to obviously tackle? Now, what I'm about to take you through might look like a few stereotypes, but that's not the intention. Essentially, you want to have a start with some kind of thing, but also just a combination of sense and strategy. And of course, you have the data and research in order to work with. But let's go through some examples in keeping clothes as the same theme of what we're about to tackle. So if we break it down for someone who's selling athletic wear, for example, I would think that we could quite conveniently assume that whoever's buying this wear is going to be active, or at least planning to be active. They might like to keep a very healthy lifestyle and shop accordingly, as that also goes along with the exercise and being active generally. They might have disposable income, and this of course does depend on the pricing. But if you are going to be on the high end of pricing, then you do need to be targeting those people who have disposable income. Of course, that is less volume than the people who don't have disposable income, but of course there's always a market for this from a performance perspective, from revenue, return on investment, etc. Disposable income people will certainly help though, in order to really help scale your business overall and really help sell the high-end stuff to obviously increase your profit margins. And they could also be interested in healthy recipes or related content. So from here, you can kind of start building up a person or some sort of individual that you would target and start thinking about the types of things or types of content that you would start targeting them with, all based on this one specific interest. There's an entire lifestyle that you could sell when there is one specific interest that can be identified within a specific target market. And this is how you need to start thinking as well. What can you build around a specific interest? If we look at corporate wear, we could naturally assume that people buying this are employed and educated. You could also assume that they care about looking professional. I mean, they wouldn't want to be buying corporate wear in the first place if they didn't, right? They might also want low maintenance, long lasting wear, more specifically. And people are busy. They don't want to be spending hours in the morning choosing what they want to wear, having to iron and different things like that. So especially when it comes down to working people, that could be quite a good assumption to make. If we look at maternity wear, then obviously we can naturally assume that the woman is pregnant, okay? They are searching for and purchasing baby goods. They are willing to spend money on quality and comfort. This matters to a woman going through a pregnancy. And they might be looking at a new home or a new car too in order to suit this new adjustment to their life. Pregnancy is actually one of the defining moments in someone's life. There are a few things like moving to a new house, having a baby, getting married. Those are key points in someone's life. And actually, research has shown that these are the times where people are most likely to change their minds about something that could be quite impactful to their overall longevity or how they spend the rest of their lives. I think that just because they are going through such a major life change, they are questioning and looking at all the options. So yes, just a bit of interesting information on pregnancy here, but also just think about how that impacts the bigger picture, because you might not only have a limitation to selling pregnancy wear, you could sell a lifestyle that goes with that, as well as the adjustments that could link quite well hand in hand. So step 4 would essentially be to accumulate all the research and think about what we have done in the previous 3 steps and create your target market more specifically. All right, and you could create what we call a target market statement. In this case, we're adapting this for a target audience, but when setting business goals, you would use your target market statement to help drive your initiative. It looks a little something like this, and I'm going to just replace the words in square brackets with actual things. So it would sound something like this, where with regards to our target market statement. Our target audience is male, aged 25 to 40, who live in Michigan and like to play golf. What is very important is that you need to try and include the most important demographics and behaviors, and only 3 or 4 points within your statement. The thing about it is that if you target too broadly, of course, that is too risky. But if you target too specifically, or if you're too specific in general, then that could also be quite risky. You run the risk of losing a lot of volume or missing out on potential customers that do actually fit your brand. So yes, that is why it's important to keep it to about 3 or 4 different specific points. And some important things to remember as well is that if you're providing more than one product or service, a target market should be defined for each offering. You might find that even though the specific products or services are quite relevant to one another, that you have a different target market and therefore different target audience that you need to focus on. So that's quite important to remember. Your target market and your target audience will differ, as your targeting options won't always fit your exact market. And here I'm referring more specifically to the paid media. That is the main focus of this course. In terms of organic and things like content marketing, then of course, the content or ads that you're creating, you're not paying for them, but the way that they've been written is supposed to speak about your target audience. There are some free resources for research. Many of them are actually paid and really only available to businesses that can spend a lot of money. But here are some free options that you can take note of right away. As a new business or small to medium-sized business, this can be very helpful, so please do take note. First of all, there is Google Trends, and this is something that you can Google very easily to find a link to. And I've also included it in your summary notes so that you can take advantage of it right away. And this is where you can see how often a search term has been entered over time. So what you can do is look at the various topics or specific keywords and see how popular they are in your area or the area that you are wanting to target, just to get an indication of actually how many people there is a need to actually target for your product or service. And then there is keyword research, and this is something that we'll be spending a bit more time on as we progress and look at Google Ads later on in this course. But this is where you would see who is bidding on your relevant keywords as well as get volumes. So monthly searches of certain keywords that are related to your business essentially. And then we have social media presence, and this is something that you can view on a company's page. You can view competitors' activity as well as current ads being promoted. So if you go to a competitor's social media page, I'm specifically referring here to Facebook, then you can actually go and see in a tab all the ads that are currently running on that competitor's page. And that is a great way to actually see what they're actually doing without having to pay to find out what's actually happening in the back end. And of course then we have owned data that you have. Whether it's in the form of site tracking or email sign up, etc., that is the perfect resource when it comes down to marketing analysis. So you could do that with your own data and whether you have a report in place. Again, if you guys have own data, what platforms do you use? I'd love to know. Do you use Salesforce at all, or Marketo, or do you use MailChimp? If you haven't heard before, MailChimp is a simple emailing platform that you can use for bulk emailing. It's very useful. SharpSpring as well, also a part of the big list of things that have been used for many years to help scale businesses and the effective efficiency with regards to communications and measuring data and storing it too. There are so many that can all provide you with a huge amount of data to do something with. Moving on to our buyer personas, this is where we're going to get a little bit more specific in terms of defining our target market. All right. A buyer persona is a fictitious character that represents your typical target customers and is based on comprehensive audience research. In simple terms, they're basically a representation of who your customer is, their characteristics, what they like, what they don't like, and how they spend their day, what type of lifestyle they lead, etc., etc., etc. Essentially, how can they help you? That's a question that we want to be asking, right? We're trying to figure out what the problem is. Remember that. Well, if you clearly define your target market and your customers, you can customize your communication across all channels so that it's actually more personalized and relevant to them. Of course, that will improve performance hugely, as I'm sure you can imagine. This insight allows you to increase performance of your segments with marketing campaigns and content that is specifically more communicative with your market. So whether it's organic or paid media, these things can certainly help. Now, just to make it a bit easier for you, because this part can be quite fun, let's take a look at our potential buyer persona for Custom Comfort. Our business that supplies customers with luxury custom-made sofas is now going to be forced into another example. We're going to know Custom Comfort inside and out by the end of this module. Now, we're only going to be doing this for one, but you would have several different buyer personas for your product, and usually you would also base this on data. But if you're a new business, it would be a little bit of a guesswork to get started. Anyway, here it goes. A simplified version. Meet Elegant Elizabeth. Alright, she is a 42-year-old married lady with no kids. She works in a management position and has an income of about $100,000 a year. And she is elegant, likes luxury and tidiness. Alright, so I'm sure you're already imagining what this type of buyer persona could be, but let me break it down in a bit more detail. She browses the internet to look for recommendations and is somewhat active on Facebook and LinkedIn to stay in touch with friends, but she does not spend too much time online. She is looking for a spot to relax after a long day of work, ideally together with her husband. She likes a feeling of luxury and is looking for products of quality and durability. She needs stability in her life. I mean, who doesn't, right? Her challenges include her long days and is not having enough time with her husband, who is also working long hours, and she does not like the feeling of an empty house when he comes home after her. Essentially, she is worried about keeping the spark alive in a marriage, and she cares about appearances, so wants to look put together all the time. Now, again, it's quite of a simplified version of a buyer persona, but there's lots more things that we could take into consideration. With time, you'll also be able to base these on data as we go along throughout the course and get a little bit deeper into measuring our marketing efforts. I know this can sound super cliche right now, but this is essentially what we'd be doing. We're making up a person based on the data that we have. Of course, your data will not give you all the information about exactly what people want to get out of a product or get up to, or what they get up to throughout their long day. But you can find out what the gender of the person is, the traffic source that they're coming from, the age, their income in some places, and also whether the users are more active than others on different platforms. It all depends on the platform that we're using to manage and monitor these metrics. But, however, we spoke about the different metrics and monitoring tools in the previous lesson, and it's up to you to make sure that you start assessing that information correctly. If you have the information available to you, it's going to be absolutely worthless to you unless you actually put in effort in assessing it. We just want to create these buyer personas so that we know exactly what our customers actually look like, because by doing so, it's going to be a lot easier to actually position ads or even our products or services in front of them, so that we can target them with the right messages and use the right knowledge that we know about them to create the right content. It's all about just being efficient and effective in our efforts. If we look at some free resources for creating buyer personas, there are quite a few. Of course, there are also third-party software or software as a service, which we mentioned in lesson 1, and various other page tools and companies that you can pay to do the research and create buyer personas around too. But when it comes down to small and medium-sized businesses, it's not so realistic. We're not going to be actually going through all of that right now, because we are starting to focus on what matters to us right now, which is how we integrate digital marketing in our new or newly started business. Okay, but starting off with analytics, of course, if you have your tracking installed on your website, then you can start to collect data from the people that are visiting your site and create almost a group of segmented people that are performing. You can also ask your employees, and they're quite a huge source of knowledge when it comes down to getting to know your customers in a bit more detail, especially if you have customer support team and an overall support team in general. You could ask them the same questions, and I'm sure they would be able to aggregate the overall answers. Then there are surveys, and so getting from them, then the information that can be portrayed on hand can be certainly useful, because then it is a form of interaction that you don't get in any of the other aspects to the different sources. So it's very important you understand what you can get out of each one of these sources, but also what type of information matters to you the most. Some sort of general conversation that employees could have with a client is very different to how interactive someone could be with a survey, because they tend to think a little bit more when it comes to surveys or answering questions into surveys, more than they would just a general conversation with one of your employees. It's very important you take that into consideration and really just focus on what would matter to your business structure the most. Then finally, there are one-on-one interviews or focus groups. Very exciting part of this. This is probably one of my favorite sources. Focus groups can be a lot of fun. It might sound like something that is only in big brands and something they can only do, but I've created and participated in a few, and honestly, people don't really expect payment for everything when it comes to focus groups. Just the fun and excitement of participation is sometimes just enough and worth it for them in that case. If there's something interesting that you know is going to be discussed, and if the person finds relevance to the topic, then many people are willing to actually do something like that for free or just for very little. So you've created your target market statement. You have some sort of buyer persona perhaps, and now what are the next steps? That's what you need to start thinking of. You always need to start thinking of what's next. Always look into the foreseeable future of what needs to happen next, right? Don't just stop after you've achieved something specific. Always look at what you can do next with the information that you've gathered on hand. You need to look at the customer journey map. A customer journey is detailed in an outline of every step a lead takes to becoming a paying customer. So when looking at creating a customer journey map, the first thing you need to do is set clear goals. All right. Essentially, you need to ask, what goals are you directing this map towards? Questions are very important when trying to understand something. And what I mean by that is it a newsletter subscription, for example, or is it filling out a lead form or making a purchase or clicking or finding out your directions? Very important questions to ask indeed. You can't combine all your different goals and interactions into one, because then it will just look absolutely crazy and of course just confuse you. So you need to ask, who is it all about more specifically, and what experience is it based on? Are they visiting your website directly, or is it at first through your social media? This is where touch points actually come in, and this is what we're going to talk about right now. You need to list your touch points from view to sales. So essentially from the beginning of them being exposed to your brand to a final sale. Touch points are all the places on your website, your marketing and your content channels that your potential customers can actually interact with. You need to list all the touch points that they're currently using, as well as the ones that you believe they should be using. Now, I'm going to go through a few examples just to explain this in a bit more detail and give you a clearer understanding of how it all works and integrates. Let's say a potential buyer sees one of your ads, searches for the product and sees an ad, right? She visits your website and browses through your products and puts them in her cart. She then fills out her information and then makes a payment for which she has received confirmation for. A few days later, her purchase is delivered and she gives a review based on her experience. Sometime later after that, she receives an email with a discount and then she chooses to use that discount. Then she goes on to clicking on the link and leading her to the landing page that she needs to find herself on in order to use that discount code and shop for more. She then logs into that profile that she already created off her first purchase and adds the products to her cart with a discount applied. This would be a customer journey, a very clear example of a customer journey, all right, with the different touch points included. So when a customer is interacting with us, that entire journey from start to finish would be something like this, and would be identified as the concept of a customer journey. If we can track every single part of that customer journey, then we'll be able to optimize it. And optimization is absolutely crucial when it comes to digital marketing. So we can streamline the process, make it faster, make it more enjoyable, easier, and also just retain the client throughout the entire process a bit more too. Essentially, we want to then just focus on how we funnel the client from start to finish. And if we can optimize this perfectly, then each time a new customer interacts with us, we'll be able to really help define the journey that they're going to be embarking on a lot more effectively and efficiently, of course, as we mentioned, but also just make sure that we retain them for more future sales and more future interest in the services that we might be able to offer too. It all just works through a chain reaction in our business offering. The next thing that usually comes up with customer journeys is marketing sales funnels. So what are they? Well, marketing funnels are a collection of stages that you ideally want potential customers to move through towards your key objective. It's called a funnel due to the volume of potential customers decreasing further down the funnel you go. But what does that even mean? If you think about it, is it every purchase made without thinking about it beforehand? Well, the resounding answer is an absolute no. We are not all impulsive 100% of the time. So then the next thing to think about is, what does thinking look like, and how does it actually change our overall behavior? Right? That's something to really think about here. What kinds of things change? Well, firstly, information that we look at actually changes. How we look at it changes too. And then where we look also changes. This should sound slightly abstract to you right now, but just bear with me for a second. I'll demonstrate with a proper example. So why do we need marketing sales funnels? Well, it allows us to plan specifically and obviously bring a certain traffic in that we need in order to have our measurables. But how we manage leads to how we'll convert those leads into customers. And obviously, how does it allow us to do that? Well, it enables us to serve different content relevant to the behavior of the person when they're in those different phases. It enables us to optimize our communication methods and therefore adapt targeting strategies. For example, you might see that there are many people in the awareness phase, but you're not actually converting them down the line into the sales phase. Because you have these different phases and these different strategies in place, you should then be able to start pinpointing where there might be potential issues. This is what this data really helps with. I just want to bring this up again because it's going to come up quite a bit. What is conversion? When we speak about conversion itself, what is that exactly? Essentially, with regards to marketing more specifically, a conversion happens when a site visitor completes a desired action, for example, submitting a form or making a purchase. And then there will be different conversions based on the phase of the funnel that someone is in. So just remember that. We'll go through those a few examples very shortly, and obviously in a bit more detail as we progress throughout the course. Let us start with AIDA, or AIDA, all right? This is the traditional sales funnel that was created in 1898. Yes, as far back as that. So quite a long time ago. And it's not the only one, but it's still quite a common method. With AIDA, there are 4 stages to a sale. We're going to go through some of them and obviously explain which examples of what potential customers would do in each stage. First of all, we have the awareness stage, of course, and that's the starting point. Then we have the interest, desire, and obviously action phase. Now, with regards to awareness, someone in that phase might be just seeing an ad. They might be just reading a blog post or interacting on your social media. So in this group, you would have all the people who are aware of your existence, or well, aware of your business existence. And they obviously then move on to the interest phase if they start interacting, because here they could be visiting your site, researching your brand, and following your various social media pages, meaning people actually show interest in your business. With desire, they might actually be researching options, so doing comparisons and perhaps submitting a lead form for more information, meaning people are also doing or have some sort of interest in your business. And they really want to engage with more information to find out a bit more about what they don't already know, or maybe just to emphasize what they already know. And of course, there is action, which is making a purchase. And that's really what we want to get people down to, right? That's that phase that we really want to achieve. The reason we use a funnel is because we need to know what kind of message to send at which point, more specifically, what kind of information we make available to our users, and obviously where. Our goal is to move people down the funnel until they take action and make a purchase. Sometimes these steps can happen in an instant. You go shopping, you see something, you get interested, you put it in your cart and then you buy it. Other times, the process takes a bit longer. Depending on the nature of your product or service, of course, this could be very different. But one thing that stays the same is that it starts with awareness. If someone's not aware of your business, they can't interact with it at all. It's just not possible. The next funnel that we have is, well, I've just labeled it the 6-stage funnel. It has awareness, interest, consideration, intent, evaluation, and purchase. What this one has done is broken down the interest category into a few more considerations and intent. Now, some examples of what a customer behavior or advertising efforts would be in these different phases are, for example, awareness, would generally be advertising in this case. In the interest phase, consumers learn about a company and its products. So tactics at this stage could include things like targeted emails or encountering newsletter signups, for example. Consideration entails customers who have become qualified leads that were submitted either during the awareness or interest phase. That can still happen too. It just depends on the type of business. Then, of course, these should be further nurtured with remarketing. In this phase, you might offer free trials, perhaps specials, or push a specific product based on their demographics or whatever segment they actually fall in with regards to your advertising. Then we have intent, which means that someone who is interested in your product is actually interested in purchasing it because they see the value that it has to offer. So examples of customer behavior in this stage would be requesting a demo or perhaps adding items to a shopping cart. Then evaluation is making a final decision. So working with marketing and sales would be required here to show that your product or service is the actual best choice out of the bunch. Marketing tactics here could be targeted campaigns, for example, based on what they put into their cart and pushing their unique selling propositions. So what makes them better stand out from the crowd? Essentially, this is where business would remind the customer why they want to buy from them. They could essentially just elaborate on more reason as to justify their purchase, just make them feel a little bit better about the purchase that they've just made to maybe help them move towards making another purchase. Then, of course, the last is making a purchase, and that is just standard making a purchase. The so-called fault with this funnel is that it doesn't include retention and advocacy. Advocacy is a fancy word for word of mouth, really, and that's where people sharing their experience in their business, in your business, with their friends or family. You obviously want to make sure that the experience that they have is positive, or at least as positive as possible. It's much cheaper to inspire repeat purchases from existing companies or customers rather than from new ones, and that's where remarketing comes in. So it's very important to remember. Then we have the See, Think, Do, Care model, which is something that has been pioneered by the Avinash Kushak and Mark Graham pioneers. What it does is, if we look at See, this entails a brand's largest qualified audience. In Think, it's a segment of consumers thinking about that particular thing. Do is consumers who are ready to buy, and then obviously Care is ongoing communication to inspire repeat purchases. So a different approach of segmenting consumers, but with the same goal in mind, creating targeted messages for consumers in each of these phases to move them down the funnel to the next stage. That's what it's really all based on. Another funnel I'd like to show you is the VAC or VAC, which stands for View, Act, and Convert. That's View, Act, and Convert. This is what we call performance-based funnel. And essentially, all efforts are directed towards capturing the highest percentage of qualified or high interest users and driving them to convert. So it's avoiding people towards the top of the traditional funnels, essentially. So we're avoiding the awareness and interest phases, but essentially we're not interested technically in those people yet because they're not at the stage where they're ready to actually open up their wallets and make a purchase. The type of funnel you would go for, again, would completely depend on your business objectives and the needs. But it's important to obviously identify which different funnels could suit your business and also maybe just your interest. What this means is that optimizations are performed based on data, essentially. That's what it comes down to. You only target the highest qualified audience, and all tactics are geared towards closing a sale. Always be closing. That's what it comes down to. Basically, it's not the spray and pray method that Ada advocates. This does seem to go against what you think Do and Care promotes, but with a performance-based model, you would be including existing customers. They would also be forming a part of your retargeting strategies. You may be asking which funnel is better, and the answer to that is a very subjective answer. What I can tell you though is that performance-focused funnels prioritize conversion, And what that means is that we have a detailed retargeting strategy. We have a low priority on vanity metrics, and vanity metrics are the things essentially that we can't really do anything with. For example, impressions. We can't take an action based on impressions, ladies and gents. Please always remember that. Then upper funnel goals are tracked but not really reported. So of course we do monitor them because we are aware that from those different phases, people then do move down from the to the performance focused phases, so the do or act version of the different funnels, but we don't report on them. We don't take credits on those goals because they haven't actually got anything to do with our campaigns. It's quite important to remember that as we progress. Then other funnels, they prioritize all objectives. So there's generally a detailed content strategy, because that is generally what is required when you're trying to target people in the upper funnel. They're looking for information. That's what it comes down to. So you'll need to be able to provide that information too. Then there is generally a wide channel use, just because you're trying to reach people in all of the different phases. There's also generally a big budget involved, so you can afford to use a wide range of channels. And there would generally be a wide variety of KPIs depending on the phase. In the beginning, perhaps it might just be a click, so a website visit. Then it might be time on site to longer than 2 minutes, and that's really a big goal. It could be subscribing to a newsletter before making a purchase. There are various options. It just depends on your site and your offering and what you have in place. So I'm going to take you through a funnel example for the See, Think, Do, Care model using a mechanic. People in the C phase would essentially be eligible drivers for the mechanic's sake. So not just everyone, but essentially just people who are of legal age to drive or are over the legal age to drive. That is what who See, Think, Do, Care would be targeting, and we would try find a way for the customers to see us by crafting messages specifically for them. So it wouldn't be anyone under the legal age to drive, but anyone of and above. Okay, that would be a very important point for us to note. If we move to Think, that would be people who are current car owners, right? A very obvious point here to note. So people who have issues with their cars, who are looking for mechanics because they can't do things themselves and they need to rely on a professional's help or opinion. Then the Do phase would be people who are actually now using the mechanic services. And of course, in that phase, it's all to do with the business, ensuring the customer has the best experience that they could possibly have with a mechanic to ensure that they come back. And with regards to mechanic, as I'm sure you can imagine, it's all about trust and quality of service. And that is where Care then falls in, because you would then want to retain the client with good communication and obviously world-class service so that they can actually come back and obviously refer you to other people as well. That referral part is so vitally important, and we can only do that if we obviously take proper care of the people who come to us, especially if you're a mechanic, as I'm sure you could understand. Let's take some time to think of an example about a mechanic, but rather apply it to a different type of funnel, a performance-based funnel, or on a VAC or a View, Act, Convert approach. Right, people in the view phase would be people who are looking at car services or mechanics, right? So not just all eligible car owners, but people who own cars who are now looking for services and repairs because they know at some point in time, if not in that very moment, they're going to have to engage with them. So they're just trying to prepare or obviously act accordingly. These are the ones that we would be targeting, and in this case, crafting messages to. The act would of course be people who are either submitting a lead or making a phone call. So they would be contacting that mechanic specifically. And then convert would be the people who are using the mechanic services. And again, the same thing applies here. It would be then up to the business to ensure that they are receiving as amazing of an experience as possible during this stage. So let's say you choose a sales funnel that you're comfortable with. You've broken down all of your potential or existing customers into different phases and determined how you are going to communicate or target them differently within those different phases. Now, what if that doesn't work? Because it doesn't always work, and you must be comfortable with understanding that, or at least it doesn't always produce the desired result that you anticipate. It might be working, but not as well as you actually want it to. Then you're going to need to look at your customer journey, and we spoke about that earlier on, in order to make sure that it is properly optimized. Remember, the difference for a customer journey is detailed in every outline of the steps that the customer takes to becoming a paying customer, whereas the marketing funnel is a model that businesses use in order to market to people at different stages in their buying cycle. So the goal is to craft a message depending on what kind of phase, you could perhaps even say mindset in this case, people are at with regards to the business. It's very important that we understand that big picture. So let's take an opportunity right now just to recap on what kind of channels we actually have before deciding on what channels to focus on. So first up, we have our own websites, and that's basically our home in the digital space. Then we have social media, and nowadays we can see clearly that social media is not just a trend, it is here to stay. And I hope that you remember all the different platforms that we have here, such as Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and so on. If you need a reminder, then please don't hesitate to go back to lesson 1 and just recap on what we spoke about there. And then we have PPC, which is pay per click advertising, which you will find for search engine marketing and also on some social media platforms such as Facebook. The next channel that we have is email. And then of course we spoke about affiliates. Remember, these are basically partnerships. That's what it comes down to. They are essentially partnerships, similar to influencers, but not exactly the same. But don't worry, we'll go into that in a bit more detail as we go into the next module. Then I'd just like to mention that there are 2 more channels that we haven't really spoken about so far, which are apps. So yes, the ones that you install on your phone that can be quite useful for ease of access and communication from business to client or potential customer. And then last but not least, we have SMS. And these are direct messages that are sent to your phone from the business to obviously give updates and provide some insight into what promotions might be happening, or obviously some updates with regards to your current membership with that company, which can obviously be used really aggressively or very lightheartedly. But again, you don't want to really come across as spammy, so that needs to be well orientated and well thought after before implemented. And again, something that we'll speak about as we progress into further modules. So ladies and gents, once again, we have reached the end of this lesson, which is lesson 4. We have 4 more lessons to go until we reach the end of this module. All right, until we chat again, I'll see you in lesson 5. Take care.